Okay, so the title that we have chosen is called Leading in Disruptive World. And I will share the leadership lessons that from the front lines, what we have embarked on since 2010. So it's about 14 years of research, but it goes back all the way back in 1996, 97. So I'm not sure how many of you, I'm sure that some of us here were around, but I'm going to talk about the Asian financial crisis, what happened, global financial crisis, and also talking about COVID and what is a future crisis that we can anticipate. And it's all based on research that we have done, as I said, starting from 2010. So, but I only put the 4 books. There are several other books earlier, much earlier, from 1995 and so forth. The research that I'm going to share with you is based on the work that we have done since 2019, which is on transforming the next generation of leaders for the Industry 4.0, which is the digital disruption, what lessons we have learned, and the 2023 revised edition of Leadership Disruptive Time, which is the looking at lessons from COVID-19 and looking at the climate crisis, looking at the future crisis because of the geopolitical lessons from the Ukraine-Russian war, which is included, and also future pandemic and so forth. So these 2 books are available. These are out of print, so you're going to be out take some, in US. All books are all published in the US by Business Express Press. So today I have these 2 books and they are available for sale at 40, only for AeU. We are giving 40% off, so please get, and for those of you who has your head of HR or your CEO, and it's very important for the CEO, get a gift for your CEO, because especially this book is about how to prepare for the future disruption, and I will talk about Trump 2.0. You have to be prepared. All organizations, all countries have to be prepared. And I talk about this actually a little bit about Trump first administration. What are some disruption? I go in more in depth, and also for HR and for you need to know how to develop future leaders, how to plan, develop future pipeline of leaders, and how to identify, assess, select, and develop leaders in the disruptive world, and in the what we call the digital revolution. So the first book, Transforming the Next Generation of Leaders, is available. So I'm going to share all the extract of the research in today's topic, which usually is a 2-day workshop in 1 hour or 45 minutes. So you can imagine. So, but I help you by putting things in graphical or in what we call images. It's easy to remember. Identity details, you go to the website. Some of this research is made available free on my website, DisruptiveLeadership.Institute. You can look at all the models. So you want to get book, and the book has all the, especially this book has a lot of research on what is the future looks like, what are the disruption, and I'm going to talk about them, 6 of them. Okay. So I'm going to ask you now that, and talk about Trump, and I'll talk about Trump. I was up until 5 a.m. listening to Trump's 3 speeches besides the inaugural speech. He was at the Capitol, arena where he has his supporters, and there was another event which he was signing off in Oval Office, the issuing executive action in the afternoon, and he talked about to the press. Of course, you need to fact check what Trump mentioned. I'll talk about some of the things that is not true. But I will talk about that and why you should be concerned. And we should be concerned. All organizations, all leaders, irrespective whether you are in the government or you are in the private sector, NGO, there will be impact. Some are minute, some are huge impact, depending, like to give an example of the solar Chinese company in Malaysia. So there are many organizations going to feel the impact, and you need to be prepared. Okay? So can I ask you, anyone here, one word, including those who are streaming, we are on Facebook Live, I'm not sure, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube Live. So if there's any response, can you just let me know? Anyone? One word. Trouble. Okay. Okay. Opportunity. This maybe dah baca lah. Dah baca main buku lah. And I'll talk about that. It's a Chinese word, Wei Xian. Yeah. Anybody else? No, Wei Qi. Sorry, Wei Qi. Wei Xian is Qi Hui. Anybody else here? Where are the faculty? Anybody? Put your hand. I want to ask faculty normally. Prof. Hand. Sorry? Uncertainty. Is that all? Come on. Adaptation. Okay? Adaptability, yes. But normally when we talk about crisis, what do first thing that leaders or anyone that come to mind, what is the first word? Solution. No. Fear. Yeah, fear. Oh, what are you going to do? What's going to happen? What are we going to do? How do we resolve it? Are we prepared for it? Are we ready for it? And many organizations and leaders are reacting, taking a reactive path to it. But today we cannot, no longer, you have to be proactive. You need to plan. You need to be prepared on how do you manage those challenges as they come forward, as you face them. How do you navigate these challenges? And I'm going to talk about this today. And one of the biggest challenge is because, Einstein says that, I paraphrase, says that you cannot solve the problem of today with the same level of thinking that created them. Because what happened is we tend to rely to the past experience. Now, I'm not saying you don't rely on past experience, but a lot of time it doesn't work. What get you here today won't get you there in the future. You need to reinvent what we call the disruptive mindset. You need to reinvent your way of thinking, challenging your mental model. That is the biggest challenge. Okay? So the way I define crisis in my latest book that's coming out in March, you can pre-order the book if you want. You can put your name there behind. One of the things that I talk about, crisis, is a series of events that would have a profound impact on the organization, which result in instability, uncertainty, or what we call earlier, in the video, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and the D. Now you call it VUCA. In the latest book, I use the word VUCA, V-U-C-A-D. D is the disruption, and disruption is continuous. And we can expect things to be, next 10 to 15 years, is going to be much more. And I will tell you why, and I will explain this based on our research, why it's so important to be prepared. Now, again, we talk about crisis, you're right, we talk about crisis. Normally people shouldn't talk about fear or danger. People say, oh, crisis, we are panicked. What do we do? How do we react? How do you respond? How do you manage? But if you look clearly, the word crisis, the Chinese has a word called Wei Qi. Wei Qi come from two words, Wei Xian and Qi Hui, means that in crisis, there's always opportunity. And of course, the JFK, John F. Kennedy, uses that to be able to explain when he took on the role at a very, very, very difficult time. The war, or the potential war, the crisis, the Cuban crisis with Russia. Those days called it Soviet Union, USSR. And you need to know how to manage and how to maneuver. And it's not everybody have the ability. But the good news is that today, you can develop the skill. You can develop and you can leverage on tools that is available out there that can help you to prepare. And that's what I'm going to talk about. How do you develop your leaders, your future leaders? Okay? And we need to be familiar with two words, the poly crisis and the perma crisis. How many of you heard of this poly crisis? Perma crisis? No? So in my latest book, the 2025, this Speaking of Crisis, so I explained that the poly crisis is when you have multiple crises happening at the same time. So when you have the COVID-19 as one crisis, then you have, of course, the financial crisis, or you have the economic crisis, and then you have the crisis, result of that, you have the crisis of the supply chain. So there are multiple crises happening at the same time, and it's not easy to maneuver. And this is the challenge that we face today, because how do you get leaders to start looking at all these challenges? How do you maneuver? How do you navigate? And how do you handle multiple interconnected crises? And the other one is called perma crisis, which we are experiencing today. There's a COVID-19. COVID-19, it was first reported by China on 31st December 2019 to WHO by the Chinese government. But it already happened in my book in 2020, the first edition of the Leadership Disruptive Time is focusing on COVID-19. And I wrote about the research by Chinese reported by Lancet, reported by British Medical Magazine and so forth. Actually, it happened before 2019 December, probably in October or August, as far as August, but the Chinese did not report it. And after today, the Chinese government has not been, and this is what I'm telling you, is all factual, you can search for it. WHO is still searching for answers as to how did the COVID-19 really, they said that the Chinese government said it's from the seafood market, and in Wuhan. But actually, my belief, based on my research, I believe it is from the lab, where there is research being done, a level 4 security lab on. Because of people who were involved in the lab were found to be sick. So, and up to today, that was in 2019. Of course, in Malaysia, we had the MCO in March 20, I believe, the MCO, and many countries, subsequently, we have the different lockdown and so forth. So 2020, 2021, then 2022, early, the WHO announced that the pandemic become endemic, as I mentioned in my video. So today is endemic, and probably I won't be surprised among you sitting down here, one or two of you probably have the COVID in you where you don't know. And this is something become like a normal, like a flu, seasonal flu. It's not going to go away. It's going to be here forever, and it will evolve and adapt in some form. So that's called the perma crisis. And we wonder, and I'll talk about what the future pandemic we can expect later. So the question is this, so when I was embarking in 2022-2023, research about 529 CEOs, C-suite leaders, the question is, 3 questions I asked. The crisis over the last 20 to 30 years, what are the crises that you are involved in? How do you manage it? Not all are successful, but there are leaders who are organizations are successful. How do you overcome it? That's number one. So what are the past crises? What do you do it right to survive until today? Question is, the next question I ask is, what do you anticipate in the future? What are the other crises do you anticipate in the future? And then from here, then my team in New York, we develop models and we come up with hypotheses. Where do you see moving forward? What are the 6 most potential disruptor disruptor that you can anticipate the next 10 years. And most important, how can you prepare your leaders? That's the last question. How do you prepare your leaders to manage this disruption? And this is where in the book, the 2023 book that's available behind, that we talk about leading in disruptive time, negotiating a new balance. The detail of the research is found in there, and what are the thoughts of this leader? What are the practices? What they do it right? And the lessons that I publish started with what we call the Asian financial crisis. How many of you can still remember that? Or anybody else was in business? Sean? Anybody else? I was with AeU Group. I was a senior consultant. Back in AeU Group is a global management consulting, focusing on organizational transformation, human resource development, leadership development. So back then, there's a lot of companies. It started in Bangkok, okay, Thailand, and Indonesia, and bringing the downfall of President Suharto. Malaysia was not spared because that's where the debate by Tun Dr. Mahathir and the current Prime Minister about whether you need to have IMF help. So you need to understand there's a huge impact. So, but it started primarily in Asia. But a lot of companies are affected, okay, not in the banking sector primarily, tourism. Then we moved to 2000, and I was in Silicon Valley in Bay Area, where we talk about the dot-com bubble. But that is very limited to technology companies. So we don't see the impact, but there's still a crisis because overvalued. You see everyone wants to go for IPO, and you find that overvalued stocks, which cannot generate revenue, but they are being listed and been sort of to the stage where it just bursts. So that's a dot-com bubble. Then that's 2000. Then of course September 11, 2001, and I was in New York 2 weeks before that. And it's very interesting to look at September 11 to the World Trade Center. Nobody will expect what happened September 11. I'm not going to go into that, but there are companies that thrive. There are companies that anticipate, not because of September 11, but they are prepared. The leaders are prepared for such calamity. For example, those in travel and tourism, they were badly affected, but travel was curtailed. Okay, travel was curtailed. So there are companies that invest in technology, like what we have during COVID. We have this Zoom, WebEx. It's not new. It's been around. The teleconference has been around for September 11. That has been prevalent. So that was lesson, and you find some company invested in the right technology to help the business to continue to sustain. So then we have the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. This is where the Lehman Brothers, the downfall of Lehman Brothers, then you have the banking, you have the mortgage crisis, and it affects many other businesses, Asia, not only worldwide, but you see the fall of and the merger of Bank of America and Merrill Lynch and so forth. So again, this results in a lot of companies in Malaysia, Singapore, in Asia, worldwide, people being retrenched. And companies have to decide what they need to do, how to sustain the organization. So that was in 2008-2009. Of course, I wouldn't have to mention about COVID-19. We know the impact of COVID-19 across all sectors, across all industry. And what has happened is that many organizations, government are not prepared, including Malaysia. There are a few governments prepared, better prepared. New Zealand, Singapore, even the US, they're not prepared. They do not know, and a lot of things. It was chaos. So the first 1 year was chaotic. and about vaccine and so forth, about ensuring the equal distribution. So if you look at all these lessons, so what I found, and I put it into the model called the crisis model, how do you manage it, how do you prepare for future crises? So there are lessons we can learn. And then the third question, the second question I asked was, I asked these leaders, these 529 CEOs and C-suite, what do you see as future disruption to your supply chain? Because when you talk about COVID-19, the major disruption is the supply chain. So when the Chinese government decide to close Wuhan, 60 million, and there's a host of manufacturing facilities around that area. So in Wuhan, it was the center of manufacturing. Just imagine supply chain disruption caused havoc. So the question now is, we need to learn from this experience. How do we protect our supply chain? So one of the things that we need to be mindful is the impact of climate change. Why climate change? Why should we bother? And Trump believed that climate change is hoax. But, you know, he withdrew from the Paris Agreement. First time that he became a president in 2017, one of the first few executive orders is to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, Paris Accord. And he still believes that it's a hoax. But climate change results in flood. It results in the, you can look at the forest, for example. We look at Jakarta. Why do the former president, what is his name? Jokowi decided to move from Jakarta to in Kalimantan, because Jakarta, in every year, the rise in the water sea level, in the next 20 years, 25 years, Jakarta will no longer be livable. So this is something you need to be prepared. So what does it mean? It means that you need to be prepared if your business are involved. There will be disruption in the supply, food supply, disruption in terms of the impact on flood. And let me give you a real example of flood. In Malaysia, we experienced it last month in the East Coast corridor, Kelantan, Terengganu, to a certain extent, you know, Pahang. And but for Malaysia it's been ongoing. But for a country who had never experienced flood, suddenly we see this is becoming prevalent. So what do we need to do? We need to be able to think, how do we mitigate the risk by ensuring that we do not experience this? And one example, good example, is Toyota. Toyota has a huge manufacturing facility in northern Bangkok. Okay, and actually they have experienced massive flood in 2012 because of the way the infrastructure and also the rain. There was for that month in 2012 in December. It was very unfortunate that it was continuous rain, and that disrupt the flow of the supply of parts from Japan, from China, from other parts into Thailand to assemble. Because Toyota has a huge facility in Bangkok. So you need, what they did right was they decided, they learned a lesson, and then they decided to have mitigate the risk by having different facility outside in Indonesia, in Batam, or having in Batam, there's one area in Indonesia, and also to have in Vietnam and so forth. Number two is interesting, is about Trump 2.0, your new world order. So one of the things that we ask is, what do you anticipate is protectionism, or what we call the, in Trump word, America First philosophy. Okay? Meaning that we have been talking about globalization for more than since WTO. WTO in 2000, when WTO was formed, the word globalization it's not really before WTO, but even before WTO, multilateral agreement, trade agreement, where countries are opening up their borders and encouraging investment and trade between countries, between blocs, like ASEAN. ASEAN has been around since 1966. And ASEAN has signed FTA with various economic blocs across the world. But what is happening is the new world order today is all about protecting my own country. And Trump, first presidency, he make it known. To make America great again is America's first. And he's prepared, and he did that. He challenged the NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement with Canada, the UMCA, the Mexican-US trade agreement. And again, he threatened that in the second during his campaign for this current administration. He said that he's going to revoke, or he's going to put into tariffs, huge tariffs between cars made in Canada, Africa, Mexico. Of course, the huge disruption going to come. Dr. gave an example earlier about the Chinese company, that Trump make it known at least 60% tariffs will be imposed on products that are made in China. And between 10 to 20% tariffs will be imposed on products made from other countries. And of course, if you look at his speech, one of the speeches, I can't remember where, one of the speeches yesterday, he mentioned that, he's proud. We have managed to save $700 billion taken away from the Chinese because of the tariff that he imposed from the first administration. Actually, not true. The money is not from China. The money are the tariffs that he imposed on American companies that brought in the Chinese products. So who suffer actually is the American producer or American companies that brought in these goods and sell to the American. What he's trying to do is to make those goods expensive, so to allow the American companies to be competitive. But he forgot, when you do that, the prices of goods are going to go up because the local companies will have to pay for the taxes, not China. Because we need product from China. But the goods come from China, the parts. And what Dato mentioned just now is true, because he's now going to look, where do these goods are manufactured? So you can have a factory here, or in Singapore, or in India. So he will look at the origin. Where is this good manufactured? Even if it goes to India, they repackage. In Malaysia, there's a lot of this repackaging or reassembling. So he's going to go into the origin. Where are the parts? Where they come from? Now, what does it mean? It means that companies are going to feel disrupted. The business supply chain is going to be disrupted because you're going to have new tariffs. You're going to make business less competitive. The other, the New World Order, and I'm more concerned, is the American. In my book, I mentioned about the challenge to the US dollar. US dollar as a global trade currency. And this is going to be the reality, the BRICS and Malaysia, PMX. I think PMX, as a leader, my research is both business and political leaders. And I can say this, that I think he's one, without talking about politics, but as a political leader, looking at what the success over the last 1.5 years, a huge phenomenal challenge that he has to face, but he's moving in the right direction, in my assessment. And I think Malaysia joining BRICS not at the expense of ASEAN. So this is very delicate, because this year is very delicate because Malaysia is the chair for ASEAN. But Indonesia, under President what's his name? Prabowo has announced, and he decided we're going to join BRICS, and he now just announced full membership. Malaysia is now just as an observer, but Malaysia planned to be full membership. Now Trump make it very clear. If BRICS is going to threaten the US dominance, is going to put in place again sanction, put in place punitive measures against the BRICS nation to punish those countries, to ensure that US remain dominant, US dollar remain dominant. But I think in the short term, next 10, 15 years, the US dollar will remain because it's a major trade currency. But China is pushing very hard to ensure that BRICS is going to be a very powerful trade bloc. And many countries are trying to join BRICS, including Malaysia. And BRICS basically stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China. The original 5, S stands for South Africa, the 5 countries. But since then, there are many other countries that have joined. So that is a new world order. What does it mean? Is that you need to be able to be prepared for the disruption to your supply chain, the way of doing business, and are you ready for that? Have you found alternative sources? Have you found ways how to navigate your manufacturing? Then we have, this is more serious, geopolitical tension. One of the biggest challenges we're going to face, and we have seen it for the last 10 years, or last 15 years, in Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines are the claimant of the South China Sea. China has made it known that is ours. That's their territory. Because this is very significant because China is asserting aggressively. So if you look at what happened to Philippines went to the, I forgot the body, I think UN, and also there's a body, the UN law of UNCLOS, UN law for sea or something, where they make known that the Chinese have gone into their territory, the Chinese Coast Guard. And you see news, the clashes. And Xi Jinping, the current president, is not going to let go. He is very dominant. He wants to ensure that that is China, right? And China is not going to let go. And I will talk about that in a short while, why Xi Jinping. Trump is grossly mistaken if he thinks that, from the first administration, he has bullied China, he has get away with it. But will he get away in the second term? And I'm more worried about the Taiwan Strait. In my book, I talk about the potential war. This geopolitical tension, there are 2 wars I talk about. One war is the current ongoing Ukraine-Russian war, which is still ongoing, and is disrupted supply chain. One of my clients is Porsche in Germany. When the war, and in Kiev, Porsche has a factory which makes their cars. So during the first 6 months, huge disruption, they have to close the factory because there's no way they can get parts across because of the war, the flights, and Russia bombing, bomber, attacking, and they have to disrupt Porsche and many other European companies which is based in Ukraine has to stop manufacturing. And they disrupt their organization. So are we prepared? So you need to diversify, you need to be prepared. And that's one in Europe, okay? But let me talk about in Asia. I'm not sure whether in the next 5-10 years, but I can bet you in the next 15 years, we have to be prepared that China Xi Jinping, and you need to understand, China and US is only 250 years of history. The Chinese has a 5,000 years of history, and we cannot take things lightly. You need to be prepared. There will be war. If US decided to defend Taiwan, and I don't think, and I say this because I don't think when it comes to the situation where the Chinese and the Chinese will want to reunite Taiwan. They have got Hong Kong, Macau. The only one left behind is Taiwan. And next 10 years, 10, 15 years, and they do not have the military strength now. They only have one aircraft carrier, the Liaoning. In terms of superior military power, the American has clear advantage. So the Chinese know that, and they're catching up very quickly. And they don't have the naval power, the air power, but they can make an attempt to provoke and to see how US react, and there will be. And the Xi Jinping is one leader. You studied about Xi Jinping. He's today now regarded, he has changed the constitution. He has now become regarded as the equivalent to Deng Xiaoping. And he wants to be regarded as the father of modern China, Mao Zedong. And you must understand why. You must understand, read about him, read about his biography. Why does he? Because of his father. His father was a general in the southern garrison in China during Mao Zedong era. And during the Cultural Revolution, father was purged and was jailed, and he's trying to redeem the name of the father. And Xi Jinping is a very shrewd, very powerful, and he has made known that he's going to be there for a very long time. As I said, usually Chinese president typically will stay for 2 terms. 5 years each, and then the Supreme Assembly will re-elect from the Chinese Communist Party, Central Committee, or the CMC, Military Commission. So today he has removed all his opposition. He has executed a lot of his people who are a threat to him. And you look at Xi Jinping, and Trump will, in my view, is that Trump today, yes, because of military superior, the superiority in the military, the way that the US, the 7th Fleet, if you look at the 7th Fleet, I had the privilege in 2006, I was invited, because being a chairman of the American Chamber in Singapore, I was invited to be on board the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan. Is a nuclear submarine, and it's part of the 7th Fleet that is based in Japan. And U.S. huge power. But the question is, of course, the U.S. is based in Japan, is to counteract the North Korea and Russia. Those days, Russia, because Russia, Soviet Union, Vladivostok, which is in the eastern part of Soviet Union or Russia, the port, which is the Sea of Japan. And US placed the 7th Fleet there to prevent Russia, aggressive, or Soviet Union at the time. And it's still there. Today they are defending Japan, South Korea against North Korea. And of course, defending Taiwan against China. So we can expect the geopolitical tension is going to happen. So what happens if there's a war in the Strait of Taiwan, and 60% of the trade for Japan, China, Korea all pass through that strait? What's going to happen? It's going to be blocked, and what's going to happen to our supply chain? So we have to be prepared, and this is a possibility, it's a reality. So there's a geopolitical tension. Fourth, one of the disruption is the disruptive innovative technology. So we have seen metaverse, we have seen AI, we have seen Gen AI, Web 3.0. All this technology which is going to disrupt and is continue to disrupt the way we do business. Many companies are not ready for it. But there's one technology that you have to be prepared, which is GAI, General Artificial Intelligence. General Artificial Intelligence. Artificial intelligence basically means that you have a system that is with huge data. Look at past experience, knowledge, look at how decision making can be done rapidly through past, past actions or past historical decision making. But GAI, General Artificial Intelligence, is not available yet. However, the US military, Israel, are using it in, recently there was, 2 weeks ago, there was a report was published in the US by a defense journal about how the Israeli using such technology to target bomb selected area in Gaza. And the danger about GAI, whereas AI or Gen AI is used, you still have some control because you need to make the decision, you make recommendation, what you should do in this scenario, you can decide. But GAI, basically it becomes like human. You have the human cognitive, you have human thinking skills, he can decide by his own. Now that's dangerous. In other words, you have a system, take away the function, your cognitive function, your emotive, affective, and decide where to bomb, where to hit, decide what to do without intervention from human. Whereas the generative AI or AI today that you talk about, there is still human intervention, decision making. Now, I'm worried because what it means is that, of course, in war, they are, and I believe the US DOD are doing it, they're testing it, and that's why the US, you must understand, the war in Russia, US is supplying a lot of equipment, a lot of weapons to Ukraine. Okay, and of course the defense industry would depend on war. And this is where, US will continue to be involved. When you talk about the Iraqi, desert storm, you talk about Afghanistan after September 11, and that's how they test all the weapons. But this new weapon, new class of weapon, and this also can disrupt businesses. In other words, you have companies who are depending on technology who can decide on taking action without your intervention. Now, can you imagine that? It's huge. There's a question of risk, question of ethics. It's a lot of questions, but that's a reality. Number 5 is not so great. The reality is already happening now. The demographic shift, the huge transformation from baby boomers to X, now X to Gen Y and Gen Z. So this is continuing to happen, and now you have Generation Alpha, those born after year 2015. Now, the question is this: are you ready for HR? It's less of significant, but this can be manageable. You can prepare organization to help leaders, prepare leaders to how to communicate, how to work with different generations. So it is not as a great threat as compared to geopolitical tension, as compared to New World Order, or as compared to the disruptive technology. And lastly, future pandemic. If you think that COVID-19 is worse, there's one pandemic is going to come. And I've been talking about this for 20 years. There are very few countries prepared. Do you know what is the pandemic I'm talking about? Even Malaysia is not ready. There are very few countries in the world. Even US recently just reported about 3 weeks ago, first death, human death from this particular potential pandemic. What is that? It's the influenza. Do you know what is it? You know what's H5N1? You heard of H5N1? Sorry? Yeah, bird flu. Now, it's huge, because you have birds migrating across the world. Birds can come in, and if that really become from birds to human, so far there's no recorded history of bird from human except first case, this in US, of course in China there are, in Vietnam there have been reports, but first time in US the CDC reported about 3 weeks ago about, and you can Google it, you can find about first time how this bird flu has evolved, and once it becomes transmittable from bird to human, that is going to be a huge problem. It's going to be worse than COVID-19 because it can be easily transmitted. So there will be, and recently there are reports of monkeypox. You heard of monkeypox? Yeah? Is it monkeypox you call it? I think in Malaysia there are a few cases. Yeah? And there are new variants of the influenza every year. So you need to be prepared. Again, the COVID-19, there will be a repeat, similar. So are we ready? Can we learn? How do we manage our businesses? How do we get ready? How do we get leaders to think differently? So basically, these are the potential, what we call the disruptive events. Again, as I said, the details, you can get it from the book. You can read more. You can get also examples of this disruption I talk about. So the question is this: how do we then prepare our leaders? How do we ensure that they have the competency, the cognitive readiness, disruptive mental agility, what we call the Paragon 7 in the video? How do you prepare them? How do you get them equipped with these skills so that when the crisis hits, they are able to maneuver, prepare? Today, don't wait until it happens. Now you need to get it ready. So this is a model that we have developed and it's been tested for the last 3 years. Companies have been implementing it, both in Malaysia and in US. It starts with communication. How do you develop empathetic listening? Microsoft is very good at this. Satya Nadella, in my book, I talk about a case study on Satya Nadella, how to demonstrate this competency. So that a deeper sense of purpose. First C is communicate. Then you have resilience. How do you demonstrate operational, emotional, and physical resilience? How do you define resilience? Anyone? What is resilience? There's when you talk about resilience, when someone, organization thrives on resilience, what does it mean? John? No. That's one part of it, but is that all? Withstand external pressure? Resilience, ability to bounce back, right? When you face challenges, how do you bounce back and learn from it and to be able to reinvent or be able to maneuver future challenges? So, and this is something which you need to demonstrate for organization today facing a lot of crises. Then of course, shifting the mental model, the way we think, leaders need to shift how they think. We need to reinvent our way of thinking. And of course, then you have to have intelligence, decision making, data, AI, use AI to be able to help you to make decisions. But you need to work at record time, speed, quick decision making, rapid response. You cannot use the same level of thinking. So use technology like AI to help you it's a tool to help you make decisions. Okay? Then you have the inspiring. How to be able, when you have crisis, a good example is Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand. Okay, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, during crisis when there was a terrorist attack, or even during COVID-19 crisis, how she rallied, bring people together to be able to bring the community together. So you need to be inspired, you need to have authentic leadership. People can see you through. And lastly, You need to be able to structure a recovery plan. Where do we go? Where are we today? Where do you want to go? The question that people need to know, how do we get there? How do you rally people? How do you bring people to prepare for the future? So this, basically, the crisis model is available in both the 2023 book, and I've updated it in the next book, the 2025. But the 2023 book is the original research. We are very detailed on how, it's a field guide. How do you implement this crisis model within the organization? How do you prepare your future leaders? Yeah? So you can get the book and read up more in detail, how do you prepare. Lastly, for the 2025 book, I talk about the board's role. Unfortunately, a lot of board of directors think that their role is just to sit on board every quarter. I don't know how often your board meet. Sit down. I sit on several boards. Sit down, discuss issues, and let the CEO run the organization. But the board has to set direction. The board has to be involved in giving guidance from a governance standpoint. Today, board has to ensure they have to look at the organization crisis management, the playbook. Whatever the CEO and the C-suite leader develop, the board has to have an oversight. Need to understand and need to be able to identify who are the right people to be able to drive the crisis response plan. Okay? Do you have the right resources? How do you ensure that the organization, the CEO and his leadership team has the right resources? So there's a lot of work the board has to do. And how well prepared are they? So you cannot leave to CEO alone to do this, no. So board has to be proactive, has to ensure, give the right support, of course give the broad overview structure, let the CEO run it, but you need to take ownership also together with the CEO to ensure that organization readiness. Yeah? So again, in the 2025 book, I talk about board's role, and it's a lot of things which, for the first time, I move from the C-suite to the board, and the board has to take responsibility. Okay, before I move to Q&A, let me just, 35. I want to end with a quote that from Arthur Schopenhauer, the 17th century philosopher, German philosopher. He says this, he says that the task is not so much to see what no one yet has seen, but to think, your mental model, to think what nobody has yet thought about what everybody sees. So all of us see this change. All of us see Trump 2.0. The question is, what are you going to do about it? How do we challenge our momentum? How do you go back to organization? For those of you who are here, where you go back to your company, talk to your CEO, talk to your organization leaders. What are we going to do about it? How do we equip them? How do we prepare them? So with that note, if no other question, I want to say thank you so much, Dato. Thank you so much. Having me, I hand over back to MC.